So if you're not familiar with this, you should be already, okay? Wrong word. The word you've used, it doesn't work. It's the wrong word, okay? Word choice. The word you've used, it's okay, but there's a better one. Usually, if I put this, I write a better word next to it, okay? Spelling goes without saying. Almost all of you, I think, are English majors. There might be one or two of you who aren't. You're an English minor, etc. You're writing papers for an English class. Yeah, you should spell correctly, and especially if you're writing about a character. And the character is actually named, unlike the Wanderer or the Seafarer, because you just call them the Wanderer, the Seafarer. But if the character is named Beowulf, this is not an example from anybody's paper. This is one from a paper from a previous class. It's not the Beowulf one. O-L-F. Bay, B-A-Y, O, wolf. I had a student do that once. And it was like a 10 to 15 page paper. And I mean, he referred to Beowulf, I don't know, it had to be 50 times. I think it was after the first 20. I line across the paper, that's it, I'm done, I'm not reading anymore, you deserve an F, kind of, right? The English department does actually have standards, believe it or not. Included in those are frequent misspellings of a word is grounds for an F. Okay, so a word. This doesn't usually happen. T-E-H, you're typing on along faster than the, okay. Spell check will catch that, so, spelling's pretty simple, common stuff. Apostrophe errors. You don't use apostrophes for plurals unless it's possessive, in which case it comes after, the S. Agreement errors. And I know I'm an old fart, okay? I'll be the first one to admit this. But I am probably, let's see, one of them just recently retired, so you don't have to worry about him. There's probably only another, 3 or 4 people in the entire department who will make a stink about this. But if you say, one should, blah, 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 then, I miss Jimmy. He was always, he's standing here, Ted, just keep at him. Then, they. One never becomes they, unless you cellular mitosis or something, or you clone, one is always one. Similarly, you don't want to change one to, it's not an agreement per se, but you don't want to change one to you. Use the same form, okay, of discourse. Use one. If you want to get rid of sexist language, cool, totally fine with that. Then make this plural and then always use they. Or keep this singular and always use a singular form. If you have to be clunky and say he or she, then be clunky. Okay? I used to tell my freshmen, and I had to stop because they started taking it seriously. I would be facetious and say, let's just not be sexist at all. Let's just use all of the forms. So S-H, it. And just whenever you refer to a pronoun, just throw that in. And I actually, my students, and I did it like this. I was pretty clear, I'm being facetious, and they didn't catch that. So, agreement, subject, verb. If you have a singular subject, you need a singular form of the verb. If you have a plural subject, you need a plural form of the verb. Everybody's 99% cool with that. They understand that. What's the problem? Sometimes you have subjects that are not simple plural subjects. They're like what? The seafarers, what? Despair and lack of faith. What form does the verb need to take? It's a compound subject. 1, 2. Make him so-and-so. Not makes. Okay? So when you have something like that, or the way some of you construct your sentences, I think you're native German. Okay? Why? Mark Twain famously wrote about the German language and said, it's the only language where you say a whole bunch and you find out what the verb is at the very end of the sentence. One of you had this really interesting construction, and I don't think I did, but I thought about reversing the order of your sentence, and I sat there and I thought about it for probably 5 minutes, which was 4 minutes too long. And I think I left it as it was because I saw why you did it. Okay? But if you got this, and then you have a whole bunch of other clauses that you put the verb down here, you got to figure out how that verb works and go back to the subject, right? So that's kind of what that is. Agreement, you got a pronoun. It had better agree with the noun that it's modifying. How often do you want to begin a sentence with there are or there is? Never. Thank you. Never. What is this here for? It's a placeholder for the real subject. There are many reasons why one should never use there are at the beginning of a sentence. How do you rephrase that? Many reasons exist for why one should never use there are at the beginning. So many reasons is the subject. There are many reasons is just like saying there are. There are many reasons are kind of a thing, right? So don't do that. Antecedent, again, it's kind of related to this if it's referring to a pronoun and noun. Same thing with this, referent. Punctuation goes without saying. Big caveat here. Punctuation. Oh, I shouldn't go there. But I will. Punctuation can be very personal. What do I mean by that? How many of you write how you speak? I do. I'll be the first one to admit it. I write how I speak. I do not speak. And everybody in here, you can nail me on this probably 100 times a class period. I do not speak necessarily grammatically correct English. Why? Because most people don't. Grammatically correct English is primarily for writing. We don't speak in grammatical contexts per se. We speak orally, both orally and aurally, A-U-R-A-L-L-Y, for how we want to be heard. So, depending upon your professors, you have some who vary their intonation, all that kind of stuff, and some who are like a monotone. They just go like this. And, okay? Punctuation can reflect that. And that can be good, except modern rules of grammar state, for example, comma splices are grammatically incorrect. Why? Because you don't splice, put together, not splice as in separate, splice as in tape together. You don't splice two independent clauses together with just a comma. But speaking, we will. Because how do you represent a comma in speech? You pause. I just did it. You pause. How do you represent a semicolon? It's a longer pause. A period, an even longer pause. Take a drink of water, End of a paragraph, go to the bathroom, come back. Why? Because what is a sentence? A sentence is a single idea. It's a single, complete, totally enclosed idea. Okay? So when you link two of those with this, you're linking this idea with this idea without any kind of real break in the two. So you don't want to do that. You want there to be some kind of break other than a pause. Grammatically, we say you do that with a semicolon, a colon, a period, or a comma and a, what thing can you use to co-join? Conjunction. That's what the conjunction means. not saying this is right. In fact, this is wrong, I will say. But for the last, this is what, 2019? For about the last 225 years, this is the way it's been done. Shakespeare didn't write and worry about commas places. Chaucer didn't worry about commas places. You read prose written in the Renaissance, written in the 17th century, comma splices galore, man. I mean, they just go on and on and on with comma splices, okay? Sentence fragments, however, yeah, you don't want to do that. Because if that were speech, and you've probably experienced this with people. I do it half the time when I'm talking and I forget where I'm going. And what happens? And I stop. Well, what happens when you speak with someone and they just stop in the middle of a sentence? Your point was? Because you don't get the predicate, right? Or it's missing a verb. Well, why is a verb important? Because that's telling you the action, or it's missing the subject. I'm sorry, who did what? Okay, so, sentence fragment. Fuse sentence like this, but without the comma. Okay? Now, for all of these, creative writing, don't worry about this. Writing a quote-unquote scholarly academic paper, yeah, write about it. Why? Because there might be a point, and I think one of you did this, and I can't remember who, and I did mark frag off to the side, but I knew exactly why the person did it. And the point, the person was making a point, okay? Because you can have something, and then you can finish it with, very next thing can be a fragment, okay? Because you're making a point. But academically, grammatically, these kinds of papers, you don't want to do that. Always make it a grammatically correct sentence. By the way, this also applies to quotations. When you quote a source, when you quote a passage, the quotation that you include needs to be grammatically correct. Okay? So if you only quote part of something and you change its grammatical correctness, yeah, I'll put it's not grammatically correct. You left off the verb, or you left off the subject of something. Right? Ambiguous. Again, you're taking one of Dr. Brewer's classes, you're taking one of Dr. Cates', you're doing creative writing, go for it, man. Be as ambiguous as you can. Be as, I can't nail you for anything in terms of what this means, as you can. Why? If you're writing poetry, you want it to be ambiguous. You want there to be multiple meanings possible. You're writing an essay where you are answering discuss the theme of life as a journey pilgrimage from a place of mutability to a place of permanence in Bede and at least two other works of Old English. You don't want there to be any ambiguity in that. Why? One, you're going to write about Bede and you're going to pick two other works of Old English. No ambiguity there. Two, you're going to discuss that theme of life as a journey pilgrimage from here to there. If you just talk about that theme as, well, if we could all just get along and I can journey to my space of happiness and you can journey to your space of happiness, and it's not talking about going from here to there, you miss the point entirely, okay? Awkward. Your four-cylinder car is only limping along on 3 cylinders. That is, usually when I write awkward off to the side, it's for a couple of reasons. One, and this is often the case, you're not sure yourself what you mean. And so when you're not sure what you mean, what do you sometimes tend to do? Logorrhea. You just start spitting out words and hope it'll all make sense in the end. Doesn't work that way. Logorrhea is like diarrhea. You end up with the same kind of stuff on the page. Okay, so you don't want to do that. So what do? 1, make sure of what you think. So you pick a topic. Do you immediately pick that topic and just start writing? Hopefully not. You think about it a little bit, okay? What else? Why is another reason, another cause of awkwardness? Well, it might not be the logorrhea part, but it might be the part where you are using too many words to express a relatively simple idea. Why? Because you're all English majors. You've been taught, you've been trained, what? Use more words than is necessary. Well, don't. I shouldn't even ask this question because you won't know who he was. Look him up on YouTube. William F. Buckley. Okay? Hosted a TV show for 30, 40 years, firing line, where he interviewed people, had them come in, etc. Founded a magazine, blah, 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 blah. He was a quote-unquote kind of the founder of modern conservative thought. That's not why he's important. The reason he's important, he liked big words. I mean, big words. Words that other people, he'd speak to them and they go, what? Look it up. He'd tell them, okay? And he used them all the time in everyday ordinary speech, where we have a word that's 4 letters long. If Buckley knew one that was 6 syllables, he would always use the 6-syllable word. Don't. Why? You're not William F. Buckley. I mean, the product of prep schools, etc. Taught, graduated Yale, went back as a teacher at Yale, Spanish, because that's what he got his degree in, when he was like 21, 22 years old. I mean, the guy was an absolute genius, all right? He could get away with that. I won't say you can. I can't. There's no way I could. So, it's best to, some of you have this written on your papers, be, or you have some variant of this, be clear, be direct, and then either be precise or concise. Say what you need to say. Or I think as I put it on one person's paper, only mean what you say and only say what you mean. Only mean what you say, that is, read it from somebody else's perspective, not your own, and only say what you mean. You don't want your reader to ever go, huh? I don't quite get it, okay? This just means reverse the order. This is usually, not always, a stylistic thing. And I'm not trying to kill anybody's style with any of it, believe me. I want each of you to have your own voice in writing. And the reason I say that is because when I had English teachers in college, they did. They wanted us all to write exactly the same. Like we were little mini copies of the Harbor Race Handbook. Okay? When I started at MTSU in 1993, the Harbor Race Handbook was required of all English students and the freshman reading. I didn't. I said no. Why? Because 1, I hated it. And 2, that's not how you teach English. It's simply by memorizing all those rules and stuff. These aren't necessarily rules. A lot of this is stylistic, but it's designed to help you kind of express your ideas in your way. This is often, if you look at how I suggest reversing things, it's the difference between what's the difference between those two clauses or phrases, Could have never been, never could have been. Which one?
Never could have been.
Why? What's the never doing? It's negating this whole verb clause. Never here is only doing what? It's only negating this. That's not what's meant. You never mean this. You always, when you're using this kind of construction, you always mean this. Okay? So that would be an example where I would have something like that. Put the one in front of the other. Okay? Capitalize, usually with names. Some of your papers, some of you who wrote about the Wanderer and the Seafarer, even though I, did this, or after a while I just started lowercasing, circling the W lowercase or the S lowercase. That's, I don't go through these and I do some mental calculation. This is 5 points and this is 0.25. We used to do that literally 25 years ago. Every one of you would have a folder and we'd mark on the back the kinds of errors you made. And there was a certain value to every one. And you add them all up, that's your grade. Totally nonsense. Okay? If you didn't capitalize the Wanderer and Seafarer, that's okay. Traditionally, when people write about those two poems, when they're talking about the speakers of those poems, they capitalize Seafarer, Wanderer, as if that is a name. Okay? Underline means italicize. You don't italicize the titles Wanderer and Seafarer. Why? Because they are relatively short poems. I know, they're 115, 130 lines each. It seems like a long poem compared to some. No, a long poem is Beowulf, which is over 3,000 lines. You italicize Beowulf. You italicize Down in the Green Knight. Okay? Remove something, insert something, usually mark the punctuation down here, or an apostrophe up here, or an apostrophe S. Question mark, not sure what you mean. Yeah, that one's on steroids. I'm clueless. And usually, I'll write something like, you lost me. What do you mean? No idea. Or, and I'll apologize right now, a couple of yours, you got to writing on all along, and I don't know, maybe you've been taking a literary criticism or literary theory class recently, and you've imbibed a bunch of that kind of prose style, and you said what sounded to be like just utter brilliance. And I wrote off to the side, this is gibberish. Okay? I'm not being mean, it doesn't make any sense. It doesn't make any sense. Or it's like saying, the round wheel is a wheel that is round. Wow, that's profound, right? Chauncey Brewster kind of thing. Oh yeah, the last one, you figure it out. Okay. Couple other things. And this has to do with reading and understanding printing conventions. Okay? And I don't know if you've ever gone over this in any class. How many of you have taken the English 3000? Just 3,000, which is like Intro to Literary Studies, which how to write papers, do literary theory, how to approach a text from this point of view and this point of view and this point of view and this point of view, which personally, I don't understand why you don't approach a text from your own point of view and whatever. But turn for a second back to the old English pages, because I want to show you something. Turn to page 68. Left-hand column. This is the end of the Wanderer. And you have a break between line 110 and the line that follows. And the line that follows reads, "So said the wise one in his mind, sitting apart in meditation." And I talked about this just a little bit the other day. Okay? So line 110, all the framework of this earth will stand empty. Line 111, so said the wise one in his mind, comma, sitting apart in meditation. Meditation is not line 112. Meditation is simply a continuation of line 111 that has to be printed beneath. Why? Because there's not room in order to print it there. Okay? How do I know that that's not line 112? Well, take a pencil and put 111 next to so said the wise one. Put 12 next to meditation. That means he is good would be 13, never too quickly would be 14. Shows the anger would be 115. And yet you get down to consolation from the Father in heaven, and that's line 115. Okay? So for many of you, you've got citations, and you say line, I don't know, 42 to 43, and I've done this. Because you actually started with the wrong line number, it might be 41 and 42. Okay? So you gotta figure out those conventions. Okay, so now that you understand how that works, let's say you're quoting lines 111 through 114 in your paper. If you're doing that, how do you need to work that into your paper? Always remember this. Greater than 3 lines verse equals block indent from the left margin. Okay? Less than 3 lines, work into sentence. Okay? What if it's prose? Greater than 4 lines of prose, block indent, less than 4 lines, or 4 lines or less, 3 lines or less, work into sentence. So, on the basis of that, you've got 4 lines, right? 111, 112, 113, 114. So what are you going to do? You're going to block indent, okay? So how are you going to write that? You're going to write, so says the wise one in his mind, comma, sitting apart in, and then you go put meditation down here? No, you don't. Why not? That's how it appears in the book. But why does it appear that way in the book? Because they don't have room. Why? Because they're printing this in columns. So you would have meditation over here. Okay? And the very next line would be, he is good who keeps his word, comma, and the man who? Never too quickly. Why? Because you don't have to worry about running out of space over here. You don't indent at all from this side, from the right side. You just go all the way over. Now, if the line is really long, I can't think of a poet who would have a line that long, but there probably is. I don't know, maybe no. If it does go over really long, yeah, then you come back over here and you would indent one more stop beyond where you started that indenting. So your paper looks like this. Here's where your paragraph normally begins. You indent not to there. Here's the invisible margin. The thing, so this is like this. So you indent not to here, you go one more tab. So 2, okay? You start your quote. It goes on like this, etc. If the line goes over, you indent a 3rd tab, all right? So that your reader knows this thing actually is a flow over from over here. Now, in some books, I can't think of any modern textbooks that do this. In some books, the way they'll show this is either right here or above the line. You'll have a line, a slash, in the word written right there. Or sometimes it's here in the word written right here. Okay? You don't see that very often. I saw a hand up. Ben?
So it's only in when we work it into the sentence that we use the space backslash.
So if you're working it into your sentence, you would have, so said the wise one in his mind, comma, sitting apart in meditation, hashtag means space, virgule, hashtag, next line. You go on, virgule, quote, parenthetical, citation. Okay? When you cite verse, always cite line numbers. Okay, so if you're citing the Wanderer, if you haven't mentioned the Wanderer, and you give line numbers. You can preface it with lines or LL, okay? If you're citing prose, page numbers, okay?
With the seafarer and the wanderer, how do you, because like if I was writing about Sir Gawain, I would say Chaucer page number. How do you do books without author? You just do the title?
Here or on the works cited page?
No, in the parenthetical.
Just do the title. Or, according to MLA, I gotta qualify this. According to MLA, up through the 7th edition, because I don't have a copy yet of the 8th edition, and I don't remember. I've not seen. Actually, I do have some MLA stuff, and I'm not positive what they do here. But it used to be you could cite an abbreviated form. Now, you can't abbreviate seafarer. It's just one word. You can't abbreviate wanderer. It's just one word. Sir Gawain and the Green Knight, you could use Sir Gawain. You could use Gowan. You could use SGGK with it in italics because it represents the title, and the title's italicized. If it's the Wanderer or Seafarer, it's in question mark, quotation marks, or if you're not sure, it's in question marks. Beowulf, it's italicized. Okay. What about something like The Wife of Bath's Tale? It's long, right? So italics? It's part of another work, though. Because it's part of another work, you put it in quotation marks. What would be the work that gets italicized? The Canterbury Tales. General Prologue would be in quotation marks because it's part of a larger work. Yes?
So even though when we read Beowulf, it is in the anthology, we would still italicize it?
Yeah, that's a difference because Beowulf is a complete whole. So The Wife of Bath's Tale is not a complete whole. That is, you can read The Wife of Bath's Tale totally on its own, but it's part of a much longer work. Beowulf is not part of a much larger work. Okay? Question?
So, in my paper, I cited Beowulf, but I only used a few pages of Beowulf, and you wanted me to cite the entire work.
On that works cited page, so here,
yeah.
After you put whatever it is you're quoting, at the very end, you put the inclusive page numbers of the entire work. So Beowulf in your book, I don't know, it's like 30 or 40 pages. You weren't the only one, by the way. A couple of you only had 1 or 2 pages. And I'm like, Beowulf's longer than 2 pages. Similarly, if you're quoting and, you have 6 lines, your parenthetical citation, the numbers better add up to 6 lines. Because that's the kind of person I am. I'll go through and I'll add them. I'll go 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. So there's got to be, 6 lines there, etc. If there aren't, and that includes, by the way, if you have one of those in it. So why do you put points, periods, dots, within brackets? What are you showing there?
You're skipping something.
I'm omitting something. I'm leaving something. If it's poetry, let's say you got the block indented quote and you skip 2 lines. Okay? You get to the end of the line that you're not omitting, obviously. Beneath that, beginning with the line you are omitting, you put bracket, and it used to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. That indicates lines. Okay? And then you have your next one. Now, I think 1 or 2 people had something like 3 or 4. 4, because 4 usually, 4 points of ellipsis indicates you've concluded your sentence and you've omitted a line. This, however, means you're omitting lines of poetry or a single line or possibly more. But when you get down to here, so say you've got 2 lines up here. Let's say it's 41, 42. You skip something, you pick up, and you've got, 3 lines. And let's say it's 48, 49, 50. Your parenthetical citation here would have 41, 42, 48 through 50. That's telling me, or whoever your reader is, this means what? A whole bunch is missing. And it's telling your reader what exactly is missing, because this tells me These two are 41 and 42, and these are the last three, so therefore 43 through 47 must be omitted. Okay? And whenever you omit something, whenever you change a text that way, always put it within brackets. Why? Sometimes writers will use marks of ellipses within their text. Maybe to indicate, somebody's thinking and it's a change of thought.
So for the essay that we have coming up, if we picked a topic and we're talking about like Sir Gawain and we quote it, you want us to do the entire page numbers? Like, is that what you're saying? I'm confused. Like of the poem and
No.
in the book.
No, Sir Gawain you would not quote by page numbers,
Line
right? Line numbers, because it's poem. Of the stuff we've read so far,
It would all be one.
no, would it all be
Not just the
Bede?
Mm.
The material by Bede you would cite by page number. Why? It's prose. But Wanderer, Seafarer, Beowulf, they're all poetry. Dream of the Rood's poetry. So you'd cite all those by line numbers. Chaucer's all poetry. What about the introduction? Say you cite the introduction, page number. And you can, by the way. You can cite the introductions to all the stuff. That's all, fair game. Can't think of anything else along there. Couple of kind of more general things. Trying to think how to put this gently, nicely, because I'm not usually gentle and nice. Wow, that was emphasis. Learn to read or develop the skill to read. Develop the ability to read. It's not what I meant. There's where one of those pauses, just pregnant pauses, as Shakespeare called them. Learn to read closely, carefully. Okay? So what do I mean by that? When a text says something, don't assume that it says more than what it says. And this is why I was going to keep your papers and not pass them back, because I was going to talk about some examples. Because I wrote on several papers. Either I said something like, you either misread what the poem says, or, and I can't remember what the or, that's what it was. Or, you either accidentally misread the text, or you intentionally misinterpreted it. Why? Why might you intentionally misinterpret something?
Fits your point.
To fit your point. Is that what you were saying, Emma? Yeah. To fit what you want it to mean. Okay? You can't do that. Okay? Similarly, you can't do that, let's say for your longer papers that you have coming up. If you have a source that says something, and one of these came from the Wanderer. If you have a source that says something and you really like part of a quote, you've got to make sure that when you take out that part of that quote, that you don't change the meaning of it. In other words, if you really like what somebody says, you've got to take it as what it means. Okay? And there was, I'm trying to remember what it was. It was in The Wanderer. And the person who, there's actually more than one person, a couple people said something, And what they did was they removed the I subject of the passage. And that kind of changed the meaning because they wanted the passage to imply something that it doesn't. Okay? And so I went back and looked at it and said, it doesn't mean quite what you think it means. And I commented about, the subject of the line and how that changes the meaning according to what the person had interpreted it in terms of their paper. But again, I can't think of the what the exact passage was. Here's another example. One or two, might have been three of you took something I said in class and you either made it mean something I didn't say, or you took part of something I said, and I'm going to give an example in just a moment, took part of something I said in class and tacked it on to another part of something I said that had two different contexts, two different situations. Here's the example. The Wanderer. When we talked about the Wanderer, okay, I talked about how, I think this was the first day of the Wanderer, first or second day of the Wanderer. I talked a little about the critical background, what scholars have said about the poem, etc. And I said, some scholars have said that there are two, maybe even three, speakers in the poem. He'll die eventually. That there are two or three, Anglo-Saxon literature right there. They'll all die eventually. That there are two or three speakers in the poem. Okay? So that's what some critics have said. Two or three speakers in the poem. And then in the same class, I mentioned how some scholars and critics also say that the poem existed in one state as originally composed. Okay? And what these scholars suggest is that the poem is essentially the original poem. As originally composed, it's essentially pagan. Okay? And then they assert that at some later point in time, a Christian gets hold of the poem and adds on the beginning and the end, and thus kind of Christianizes it. Okay? And what, like I said, two or three people kind of talked about this and kind of mixed it up a little bit. What one of the individuals did, I can think of this very clearly, is they kind of conflated these two things. So that one of the speakers represents the pagan poem, and the other speaker represents the Christian poem. Well, that's not at all what I said, and that's not at all what any scholars have said about the poem. That is, the scholars who read the poem as having two or three different speakers and as there being interpolations, they don't say the opening of the poem is Christian speaker, and then you get pagan speaker, and then you get to let's all find joy and peace in heaven, and that's the Christian speaker again. What they do say is there's two or three speakers, okay? The one at the beginning might be one speaker, and then the guy who says all the stuff in the middle might be a second speaker, and the guy who says all the stuff at the end might be a third speaker, or it might be going back to the first speaker. We're not really quite sure. Nobody's 100% positive. I don't think there are three speakers. I don't think there are two speakers. I think there's one speaker. And I think when it says, so said the wise man, or thus spoke the wanderer, that's kind of the wanderer himself, speaking of himself in third person. Okay? But one of those isn't necessarily more pagan, more Christian than the other. Okay? Other questions. Because one of the reasons I went over all this is twofold. One, I'm thinking about our Middle English exam, which we're going to talk about in a moment. And I'm also thinking about your longer paper. So that hopefully, having done all this, will forestall some problems in that longer paper. Okay, so the Middle English exam, which I don't have a copy in front of me of. I want to be democratic. And what that means is I'm going to give you an option, but it's an option everybody's got to take. Okay? But the option is you can do the exam as I've already distributed it. That is, it can be an essay exam. I'll push it back one day. So it won't be due next Tuesday. It'll be due a week from Thursday, give you a little bit more time. You can do that exam, or we can do an in-class objective exam, and that would be on Thursday of this week. But, so 3 big buts, emphasize that. If we do that, I will send you today, like this afternoon, an example of what the exam would look like. That example would be what would have been the Old English exam, okay? So that you will see the exact form. That exact form, I can tell you right now, will have passages to identify. What does that mean? You'll have passages from poems, and you will be responsible to tell me maybe who the author is. Of the Middle English stuff we've done, how much of that can you tell me who the author is? Even though we didn't discuss it in class, it'd still be on the exam. Lonval, right? Because who wrote Lonval? Anybody read it? You should read it. Marie de France and Wife of Bath's Tale. Chaucer. We don't know who wrote Sir Gawain, do we? No, we don't. Okay? So it could be identify the author. If it's a passage that we don't know the author, what do you write down? Anonymous or unknown is fine. Okay? It could be a passage where you identify the speaker. Now, if you go for this, and we're going to take a vote in a minute, if we go for this, these passages, these would be major passages. Okay? It wouldn't be, let me find something in Middle English. It wouldn't be, then ran she a pistol in his ear and bade him to be glad and have no fear. Because I'd go, what? Who is that? No, it would be something like, I'm not saying this would be it. My lady and my love and wife so dear, I put me in your wise governance. Chooseth yourself, which may be most pleasant and most honor to you and me also. I do no force the whither of the two, for as you liketh, it sufficeth me. It's a pretty recognizable, we spent quite a bit of time talking about it. That's the knight to the loathly lady. Or it might be, then quod I have get of you mastery, quod she, since I may choose and govern as ye list. And then she says some other stuff. So more than likely, it would be a fairly long passage, unless you ought to just know it immediately. Okay? It could be a description of a character from the general prologue. If we did this form of exam, that would include the knight, the friar, wife of Bath, the nun's prioress, the monk, the monk, the miller, the parson, the plowman, yeah, it'd probably be those. Notice that's not even half that are included in the general prologue. Not even a third, I don't think. Okay? I saw a hand up. Ben, you had your hand up.
I did. It wasn't very important. What was the passage that you read the first time that you were like, oh, this is not going to be on it? Because I was just curious.
Oh, that was somewhere in the middle of the...
Was it the wife of Bathsheba?
Yeah, it was the wife of Bath's tale, but it was either in her tale or in the prologue.
Like I said, it was.
It's 2 lines chosen at random. They will not be lines chosen at random. They will be lines, with the exception of Lawnval, because we did not talk about Lawnval, but I sent a video of that. They will be lines we have definitely spent time discussing in class. Yes?
So Lawnval will be based on the videos you did, though?
Yes. Okay? And there are certain lines I emphasize. Like, take a look, and she does her little twirly thing, etc. But there probably wouldn't be much from Lawnval. They'd probably be primarily from Chaucer and Sir Gawain and the Green Knight. Primarily, okay? So there will be passages to identified by author, possibly identified by speaker, possibly identified by person being spoken to. So, for example, if you have a passage from Sir Gawain and the Green Knight, and it's, you are the one who knows everything about love, teach me about love, blah, 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 blah. Who's speaking? Who's being spoken to? Well, Sir Gawain never says that to anybody. That's obviously the knight's wife speaking to Sir Gawain kind of thing. But, again, there'll be passages we really emphasized in class, okay? I'm not just going to, that's not a good example because everything on that page I talked about. Same thing. Each man taking the path that attracted him most. Well, that's some of the guys out on the hunt. No, it won't be anything like that. Okay. So, identification. What else? Short answer. Historical background kind of stuff. The kind of stuff that shows up in your introductions, which you're supposed to be reading. Possibly a question about a character, etc. Okay. Short answer can mean literally anything from one word to a sentence. Okay. Probably some multiple choice in true false. William the Conqueror defeated Edward the Confessor on Christmas Day, 1066. Wrong. Me. Bad girl. No, it's false. Okay? And if it's partly false,
Still false?
it's all false. William the Conqueror defeated Harold Godwinson on October 15th, 1066. He's so close to being right, but it's off by a day, so it's wrong. Okay? That kind of thing. There won't be any essay. If it's objective, it'll be objective. Okay? So even the fill in the blank stuff will be objectively true and or not true. Okay? So, having said all that, with 20 minutes to go, it's that kind of exam, and there will be extra credit. Probably, I don't know. I usually put 20 to 30 points extra credit. Okay? The other one, there won't be extra credit. The essay one. Okay? How many want to still go with the essay? How many think your powers of BSing are that? I'm sorry. I'm kidding. Because I always did. I always thought, well, yeah, I can, And usually, I was not a very good English major. Let me just put it that way. I was a lot better at Frisbee and other stuff. So who wants to go with the essay? The one as already distributed. Put them way up so I can see. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7.
Could we compromise? Like, maybe do the test on Tuesday instead of Thursday? We can start talking about Shakespeare's poetry, yeah. But if we
I'm fine with that.
yeah,
I'm fine with that.
We can do that.
Yeah, I'm totally, that's cool.
Because it being this week is like, this.
Yeah, I understand. Yeah, I mean, we can do it on Tuesday of next week. My only concern is, quote unquote, you're going to be reading other stuff, and I don't want you to get, because Shakespeare's a lot of quotes.
That's very different.
But it's different. It's very, very different. So, I mean, that's fine with me. So if we have it on a week from today,
Yes.
okay,
Yes.
let me redo this thing. Who wants to go with the objective exam? A week from today. Hands way, okay, that's pretty much. All right, so that's what we'll do. And I will send out today an example, okay, of the form the exam will take. It won't be anything that'll be covered. It'll literally be the exam you would have taken if we hadn't had 2 weeks of illness and whatever else.
Because we're not using that exam, can we still like pick from?
If you want to use one of those
As
exam
our big
questions
paper?
as your paper, have at it. So, for those of you who haven't yet, I thought I had my syllabus out. I don't. For those of you who have not yet thought about a paper, we'll just spend the whole day doing this, which is actually what I had planned. Your paper's due, I believe, 2 weeks from today. 16th is 2 weeks from today. Yay! For the same person, too. So, word of advice from former bad English major for my first couple of years as an English major, because I had 7 different majors. I took the long plan in college. I was 7 years undergraduate because I worked, I dropped out of school, I got married, I dropped out of school, all that kind of stuff. So, word of advice, start thinking now. Better yet, start researching now, okay? Because you don't want to do what one of my students said to me the other day. One of my lower division classes, he came up and said, "Oh, Dr. Sherman, I started that paper at 4 a.m. the morning it was due." I was like, don't tell me. You got a B on it, but he's a really smart student and excellent writer. Yeah, you'd better get a jump on it, because 2 weeks, especially into the semester, bingo, it's going to be gone. So if you haven't run a paper topic by me, you should soon. You could do it at the end of class. You can shoot me an email. You can come by during office hours. If you want to use one of the topics that's on that middle English exam, you can. I believe I said that when you did the old English exam, that if you wanted to take one of those and expand upon it, you can do that. Well, I don't have any problem with that. I don't consider, writing, using something you've done before as plagiarism. Why? Because plagiarism is stealing another person's ideas and thoughts. It is idiotic to say a student cannot use his or her own work. Now, with this caveat, doesn't mean Brenda can take this paper, take all the stuff off of it, and turn it in solely as it is for another class. That's not right. That's you got to do additional work. But for this class, he couldn't turn that in for his term paper. Why?
Because it's a C and I don't want that.
Well, okay. Good, honest answer. Why else? It's not 10 pages, so it's going to receive an automatic. Okay? It doesn't have any external sources. It's all primary source. So those papers have got to have external sources. So if you want to use that old English exam and go do a bunch of research, have at it. Okay? By all means. If you think, I want to wait and do some Shakespeare or something, start reading now. Or you want to do something a little bit later, start reading now. It's the one problem I have with having papers due, essentially a week before the end of class, because we get some really good stuff at the end of class. I mean, some really good raunchy stuff that you might want to say, how in the world is this considered a great English poem? Some of the stuff is. Okay? And some of you might want to just rip it apart. But you can't do that. So, any other questions?
So by next
Yes. I said read all of them that I have on the syllabus. The ones we will emphasize because we are getting so close to the end and have run out of so much time. Thanks to Beowulf and being sick for 4 weeks, 2 weeks, whatever the number was. I'm probably going to have to reduce what we're doing to, see if I can find the syllabus. It's a different class. It's a different class. Do I not have to get all?
It like spiraled out of the air.
Hold on a second. Okay, I don't have the syllabus with me. So we've got, we've got Shakespeare on the syllabus. Okay, so we will do what sonnets we're able to do. Thank you. On Thursday. So let me see. We've got Thursday's the 4th, and then a week from today is the 9th, and then the 11th, and then the 16th, and the 18th, and the 23rd. 16th, yeah, 23rd. That's the last day of class. So we're doing the exam then. So 4 more days after that. So after Shakespeare, I've got Johnson, Donne, Herbert, Herrick, Marvell. So probably what we're going to do this last day will be everything that I've got for the last 2 days on the syllabus. Herbert, Herrick, Marvell. The 18th will probably be Donne. The 16th will probably be Johnson and Donne. The 11th will probably be Shakespeare and Johnson. And then Tuesday, whatever the day is this week, Thursday of this week will be Shakespeare. And for Shakespeare, yeah, all of the highlighted ones, especially 18, 20, 30, 73, 116, 127, 130. Read those really closely, because probably this one in and of itself is going to take a long time. Sonnet 116, it's probably Shakespeare's most famous sonnet. So we'll do Shakespeare Thursday, and probably next Thursday we'll start Johnson. Johnson, we might actually be able to finish that day, or very much this day. Donne, I'll probably just end up having to take some stuff out. I did my dissertation on Donne, which is why I usually do 3 days of Donne. And then Herbert, Herrick, and Marvell, we can all do in 1 day.
And then we go.
Yep. And then we wait a week, and then have an exam. And that'll be an in-class exam, the final exam, in-class exam. So this exam a week from today will kind of give you an idea.
So is the final going to kind of be like if we had an old English exam? Like
No.
That's what's going to be on there too, or is it just
The final exam will just be this stuff, except for any extra credit.
Okay.
Extra credit might go back to the beginning.
Okay. So
Okay.
it's not.
All right. You are free to go.
Hi.
Hi.
Question.
Uh-huh.
So, which words